What is the worst adult temper tantrum you have seen? Worked at a Wendy's for a few years during college. The meltdown of legend was when a little league mom came in with the whole team of kids and ordered food for all of them and some of the parents. She then began to grow increasingly frustrated, visibly upset at the amount of time it took to prepare such a large volume of food. She begins to pointedly ask why her food was taking so long, over and over, each time her voice getting a little higher. After a few minutes she starts saying this is simply unacceptable and asking for a refund, despite the fact that she can see the poor sandwich maker is standing right next to me working frantically to put all her cheeseburgers together. I say, okay, let me just get the manager. She then starts screeching she wants the refund now and throws her carrier tray of Frosties onto the floor, gets down on her hands and knees, and I crap you not proceeds to start grinding the spilled Frosty into the carpet with her bare hands, all the while shrieking as if her child had been run over in the drive-thru. I met a girl online and we talked for a while. Eventually, I paid for her to visit me from LA. She was okay at first, but started complaining about the stupidest stuff, like that I have a cat, which she already knew. The next day she freaked out over Red Robin and made us leave. By then, I had enough, but was biding my time. Eventually the time comes for her to go home and I give her a ride to the airport. While we are walking in she gets mad about something, and I can't even remember what it was. Here is where it gets good. She literally lays on the ground and starts screaming and flailing like a child. Woman is 31 years old. I just dropped her luggage and walked back to my car and drove off. Fun postscript. She missed her flight and called me trying to get me to come stay with her at the hotel. No. Working at Burger King, a lady came through drive-thru just as we opened at 6. Demanded a McGriddle and drove up before we could tell her she's at the wrong place. She screamed at us, "Where it at? Where's my McGriddle?" Wouldn't leave the drive-thru until we gave her a McGriddle. Yes, she was drunk. Yes, the police came. I was working at a small convenience store. I usually work as a cashier and another person works in the back of the store at the deli. Well, this guy comes in and wants a breakfast sandwich from the deli and my co-worker tells him it'll be about 10 minutes because she has to make it. He starts to get really mad that he has to wait. I guess he thought they were pre-made or something. Anyway, he waits while she makes his sandwich and comes up to pay and I ring up his sandwich. The price is $3.99 and it's written on the sandwich, but it has a tax for prepared food, so it's actually a little over $4. He starts yelling at me about how I had the price wrong and he's in a hurry. When I explain we have tax for sandwiches, he gets pissed, grabs the sandwich and flings it right at my head and runs out of the store. So he pretty much wasted 15 minutes and I got a free breakfast sandwich for lunch. I was walking home one night, and in the parking lot adjacent to my building there was a guy, late 20s, maybe early 30s, sitting on the pavement waving his arms around and yelling. He was surrounded by 4 police officers who were trying to get him to calm down. As I walked by, I heard him yell, "Just wait till my dad gets here. He's bigger than all you buttholes." I think my dad's gonna fight you. Loses all power somewhere in the teens unless 1. Your dad is a professional sports fighter, 2. You're talking about a legal fight. Stan comes into office and notices Bill has muddy boots propped up on Stan's desk. Stan goes red in the face, leaps onto Bill's desk and proceeds to do what I can only describe as a river dance. "How do you like mud on your desk?" Stan screams. I about crap myself laughing. This is probably the only one that is semi-justifiable. I worked at Tower Records way back when. A nicely dressed middle-aged woman came up to the register to ask about a CD that was supposed to come in. It was some obscure classical album. Obscure enough that she couldn't tell me the album title, the composer, the band, nothing. Our computers had to have at least one of those pieces of information to look up if it was in stock and where it would be located, or even if it was in stock at another one of our stores. Apparently, she'd gotten a stock transfer from another location, but couldn't remember which one. The way transfers worked, if another store in the region had it, it would show up as being in stock there. Once they pulled it, the receiving department would scan it, prep a shipping slip, and it would show as in stock at our location once our receiving department had received and scanned it, and then they'd call the customer to say it was in. Anyway, When she couldn't give me any info I needed to try to look it up, she started full on screaming at me for not helping her. I did the super polite "I'm so sorry I can't help you" while smiling as sincerely as possible retail spiel, and, as it does, it just enraged her. The more polite I was, the worse she got. I explained that I couldn't look up this CD for her without any info, but that I'd be more than happy to help her if she could remember the title, composer, or artist. Then she started stomping her feet while yelling at me. Finally, a bewildered customer came up to be wrung out and Lady Stomp stormed off into the classical room. I called back to another employee that was in charge of our classical section and asked him if he'd mind helping her. If she hadn't been such an entitled butthole, I could have called the other store to check the status of any stock transfers coming to our store. Surprisingly, she came back to the register to apologize to me after cooling off in the classical room. Since she was playing nice, I went ahead and called the only other location in our state and found out that it was en route, and told her we'd call her as soon as it came in. It was fascinating watching her cycle through civilized, screaming and stomping, apologetic, and then grateful. I like to think I used to do my part in training customers for the future generations of retail workers. I watched a guy in Walmart flip his crap at like 10 PM. Because some sections at the store were blocked off to be waxed overnight. He had his entire family, which included 4 young kids, and was freaking out at the self-checkout lady over the section being blocked, and asking why they didn't do it later in the night, even as she explained that it's a long process that takes literally all night. I watched my boss lose his freaking mind when another employee wore a collared shirt with his most hated rival football team. I saw a full-grown adult pitch a fit about the increased price of milk. They went and grabbed the receipt of their last week groceries. The difference was 3 cents. They proceed to go through every derogatory word to describe the poor alley worker, stomps their feet. After 10 minutes of this, the managers finally arrived to only have it repeated for another 10 minutes. Management caved and awarded the individual the price of milk for a week ago. All of this was over 3 cents. I almost had to call to beck cops at work because a 50-year-old man followed a 19-year-old girl into the store and tried to fight her because she was driving slower than he would have liked in the parking lot. My ex-girlfriend was terrified of being alone. Not like crippling sadness from not having a soulmate, literally being in a house or apt when no one else is home. One Christmas I went home to visit my family, and she went to visit hers in a different town. Something went wrong and she got in a fight with her sister, so she left and went back to our apartment. I still had about a week left of my trip home to see my family. She called me and said she expected me home that day because she couldn't be at our apartment alone. I told her I took time off work and came home to see my family because I rarely get to do so. She started screaming at the top of her lungs that I needed to get home ASAP because she was terrified. I hung up because I practically went deaf in one ear from her screaming, so she called my dad and screamed at him that she was going to kill herself if I didn't go back because she couldn't be alone. Absolutely ruined my Christmas with my family. I ended up going back later that day and lost a lot of respect for myself. She is an ex, so that earns you your respect back. I work in a fairly popular bakery. Every Wednesday, we have a crazy sale, meaning one of our more popular items will be on a very nice sale. This Wednesday happened to be cookies. We were selling them for 75 cents and, as you can imagine, they sold very fast. Our bakers prepare for this, usually having 5 extra trays of cookies to sell. One of our most popular cookies sold out, but we couldn't make more because we ran out of supplies for that kind. Most people were very understanding and just picked another cookie. Enter the crazy lady. She saw that slot for cookies was empty, so she asked if we had any more. I kindly said that no, we were out, but the bakers just went off to get the supplies to make them. They should be ready within the hour. She went insane. She started screaming about how she needed them because she wanted to impress her friends. I suppose she was telling them they made them or something. I don't know. She actually grabbed the cookie display and tipped it over, ruining our stock for the afternoon. She stomped on them all, saying how if she couldn't get her cookies, no one could. She is now banned from the store and we keep the cookies behind the counter where only we can reach them. What a horrible woman. If I can't have them, no one can is like cartoon crazy evil villain thinking. I worked part-time for a marketing company promoting food brands many years ago. I made some simple dishes and served them in the store from a food court. This family rushes in with 5+ kids and plunders the samples. After stuffing themselves, the parents ask if it was pork meat in the food. All meat dishes being pork, I said yes. They threw a huge tantrum since they were not allowed to eat pork. You would think that would come up beforehand. Typically people who don't eat particular foods, primarily religious belief or medical reasons, put more thought into what they are eating before having a problem. Of course, then there are people who want to blame everything on everyone else. In grade 8, the foods, cooking, teacher lost her crap in because my group's kitchen couldn't find the right sized mixing bowl. She went through our entire kitchen, frantically opening every single drawer, as though a large mixing bowl would be hiding with the cutlery. She screamed at us for losing this precious mixing bowl, as though we stole her wedding ring and flushed it down the toilet. The rest of the class stopped making cookies to watch this short, fat French-Canadian woman doing her impression of an angry tornado while shouting in Franglish. Just as she was about to burst into tears, a kitchen group across the class found the mixing bowl. Turns out someone accidentally placed it in the wrong kitchen. A week later she shouted at us for an entire class because she found a grey hair in another class's brownies. It was pretty obvious it was her hair. I had a teacher that taught French who acted like this. Finally got fired after hitting an autistic kid who was causing a fuss. I saw a grown woman yelling at her 15-year-old son because she told him he could get anything off of the menu and he happened to pick one of the more expensive meals, and I heard her go, "I can't believe this. You kids think I'm made of money. You kids are going to kill me. My chest hurts just arguing about this." He responded by saying something like, "Well then you shouldn't argue. Next time just say sorry and you can't afford it," and she blew up even more. She blew up more because she knew her kid was right. I told a lady that I couldn't return her 45-pound bag of dog food that was probably 75% gone. She started screaming that the customer is always right and continued to scream it until we had to ask her to leave. I wish people understood what this saying means. It means that companies that don't cater to the customer will lose business and this will be reflected in the profits. It doesn't mean that you can walk into a place of business and make any ridiculous demand you want. A woman lost her mind at the movie theater concession stand because they only sold Coca-Cola beverages. "But I only drink Pepsi. I can't believe you don't have Pepsi. What kind of business is this?" This went on for several minutes. Then she demanded to speak to the manager and insisted that she be refunded her ticket price because she never would have bought it if she'd known they didn't have Pepsi. The manager refused to give her a refund. Of course she ends up in the same theater as me and my friends, and she whines to her friend the entire time up to the movie start. Then, you know the bit they play before the previews where they promote the concessions? LOL. A giant Coke bottle goes up on the screen and she must have felt personally taunted because she yells F-A-C-K Coke. Someone walked out of the theater and returned with an usher and the manager, and she was escorted out, with her friend scurrying behind them. She had to have been in her 50s. Completely batshit crazy. Hahaha, as soon as you mentioned the preview ad, I lost it. They make the Coca-Cola ad so intensely dramatic at the theater that I can only imagine the blinding rage it brought upon this woman. I used to work for a coffee shop that was always busy. I mean, like there was a constant line out the door. I had a man completely skip the line of about 10-12 people waiting, grab a juice out of our fridge and come up to me single-handedly ringing everyone through. He cut off the next person and put the drink down and started pulling money out of his wallet. And I told him I wouldn't ring him through without standing in line first. There's a queue. Use it. He went from a general butthole, smug expression to enraged, red-faced, screaming at me, telling me that he was just buying a freaking juice, not a coffee, to stop being such a freaking stupid bee and just ring him through. Berated me for being a barista even though if I wasn't there he wouldn't be getting any service, and if I was even remotely smart I wouldn't be working here. So to just do my job like a good girl and ring him through, and then threw money at me. I didn't even remotely change my expression the whole time. His bills all fell on the floor in front of him. I pushed his juice aside and then motioned to the next person in line to order. He got so angry that he looked like a dumbat in front of so many people and didn't affect me. He grabbed a 1-pound bag of coffee beans off of our counter and threw it across the store, grabbed his bills off the floor and walked away, telling me that he would never come back and our business would fail. Yup. At my workplace we had to call the police because 2 women got into a fist fight in an elevator. It had apparently started because woman A was talking on the phone and woman B didn't like that very much. So naturally woman B decided the correct course of action was to start punching and hair pulling. There was quite a bit of blood when they were finally pulled apart. What made it sadder was that woman A had her daughter with her. Poor little girl was inconsolable and crying her eyes out. She was so scared. So for some reason people tried to zone in on the races of these 2 women. All I'm going to say is the races and the roles they played in the situation are not what you all are assuming. I should also specify that I'm not entirely certain the call was still taking place on the elevator. That's just where the altercation took place. But if it did, I work in a small building with only 3 floors. As long as you aren't in the basement and have a decent cell phone provider, service isn't too bad as you tend to be in and out pretty quickly. The worst was definitely from a man when I worked for an auto parts store. The parts often have lifetime warranties, and all we needed was some info and we could replace it up to the day you junked the car or died, whichever came first. I asked the gentleman for some info, phone number and name, and he refused. I explained that without it, I couldn't give him his lifetime warranty, and he lost his crap. I mean, he turned this violet color, vein pulsing in his fat forehead, yelling and screaming at me. I can't even remember what he was saying because I just stared incredulously at him as he ranted and raved like a madman, threatening me, thrusting his grubby finger in my face. I seriously thought he was going to reach over the counter and try to kill me because he sure looked like he was going to. My manager came running up and tried to intervene, and he just kept on spewing his angry rant and everyone else in the entire store had fallen silent. My manager kept saying, "Sir, if you keep this up I'm gonna have to ask you to leave," but the customer wasn't listening and screamed over him. Eventually, after at least 5 minutes of this insanity, the other customers revolted against him. One man, a mechanic who was a regular, eventually stepped right up to the guy and said, "I'm a mechanic and you're wasting my time because this young lady asked you for information. Get out of the store. You are costing me money by standing here. Get the frick out." The angry customer yelled back at him, saying he'd beat the crap out of him and they could take it outside, etc. Another customer shouted at the aggressor, telling the guy to get out multiple times, until the man finally threw his items to the floor and left. As he was walking out, I began ringing out the mechanic who had yelled at him and asked if he had a rewards card, to which he replied, "Yes, and I will give you my phone number," as loud as he possibly could. TLDR. Got yelled at and threatened by a craphead. Lovely mechanics came to my rescue. I worked at an arcade and a family came in being extremely rude, talking about how crappy our prizes were and how expensive they are. It's an arcade. It's not going to be the highest of quality. The mother came up and told me to give her the big bear on the wall. I told her I couldn't. She doesn't have enough tickets. She started yelling at me saying, "Why the frick not? It's obviously been up there for years. Just fricking give it to me." Even told me she was planning on calling my manager since I wouldn't give her the bear. I said that's fine and gave her the number. She stormed out and I went in the back room and just started flipping her off. I hate customer service. At O'Hare boarding my flight, a lady handed her ticket to the gate agent and was informed that she was at the wrong gate, as this flight was going to DFW and she was going to LAX. Now a sane person would assume that the person who works for the airline and just let 50 people on the plane with boarding passes that say they are going to DFW would know where this plane is going. But this cunning traveler wasn't having it. They told me the flight to LAX was at this gate. "You're lying to me," and then the gate agent offered to look up what gate her flight was at, but she just snapped back and asked the gate agent, "Are you sure?" about 5 times, each one louder and angrier than the one before. Then asked the people right behind her in line, including me, "Are you sure this is not the flight to LAX?" And then she stormed off, presumably to find what gate her flight was actually on and run in that direction. But that's what a sane person would do, so who knows. I got a call very early one morning asking if the 7 o'clock flight was going out. I said I was sorry but they hadn't reached the airport. The guy insisted he'd called the airport and kept repeating the question. I finally said yes, the flight was leaving. Then I went back to bed. Some people are just so strange. One I mostly saw the aftermath of, but I heard a lot of banging and yelling as I and several co-workers at a small company rushed to the front office to see what was going on. It turned out two women had gotten into a full throwing stuff at each other fight, including their chairs, all because one had started a diet and the other had a candy jar on her desk. The other one I saw when I was a kid, and it was a full bout of batshit insane. After a girls softball tournament, one of the parents had a freakout while first and second place teams were lined up and receiving their trophies. My sister was on one of the teams. She ranted, screamed, yelled at the umpires, accused them of fixing the game, threw equipment around, threw dirt, stopped just short of assault, and the umpires and coaches mainly let her rant, even when she was screaming in their faces. Her daughter was standing there, holding her second place trophy, in tears. Finally this woman yelled at her daughter to come on. They were leaving. The daughter clearly wanted to stay, but the lady kept screaming, so the daughter stepped away from the team and walked toward her. The woman tore the trophy away from her daughter's hands and threw it on the ground, the two of them heading off into the parking lot. I felt horrible for the girl, and it was one of the first times I realized a lot of adults suck. My friend's husband let the air out of my tire because he was mad I was at their house. Didn't really think that one through. That's probably the best instant karma here. This is the only time I've had to walk away from a customer in order to keep my calm and not get fired. I work at a certain video game retailer, and I had a lady try to trade in a PS3 that had pieces chipped off. A large crack in the case, smelled like a cat had used it as a litter box, and had both thumbsticks on the controller chewed through to the little plastic nubs. Well, when I told her I had to put a refurb fee on the system since I couldn't sell it as is, she flipped out on me, cursing up a storm, and calling me a thief for 20 minutes before the manager had to get involved. I even tried to reason with her through asking if she would be happy if I had sold her that particular system, and she screamed at me that no, she wouldn't, but that isn't her problem, and that she is going to get the full value out of her system. It was so bad her own daughter came up to me afterwards and apologized for how her mother acted. Oh, and the lady got her way eventually by having the manager discount the PS4 she was purchasing by the amount of the fee. Just wanted to spread a bit more light. The manager didn't intervene earlier because he was on break, and he is a fantastic manager. It was one of those situations where the customer would have escalated to the district manager, and then would have gotten her way anyway, so the manager went ahead and put a discount on the transaction. He did however get back at her by throwing a few things in that she didn't really need, including a few things she absolutely couldn't return, and got nearly a $1,000 sale out of her, which still boggles my mind that she spent that much and was pissed about losing $30. Man, I knew the manager would cave as soon as I read this. I used to work in a video rental store and we rented out systems with a security deposit. Guy brings back a Wii and 4 controllers completely trashed, and when I tell him he won't get his deposit back he goes apeshit. My manager then refunded the deposit, after like 2 minutes of explanation. Facepalm. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.